All right, welcome back to another edition of Computer Compulsive. We're coming to you from Craig's basement. It's been a while since we talked, and Keith has been hounding me to get this video done. My apologies for taking so long. In November, we found a local collector in Calgary that was liquidating his entire collection of computers. And so what happened was he called me up, he sent me a text saying, Will found this guy. We got to go to his house and see what's going on. So it was a Sunday. Went over there and just saw this unbelievable collection of computers. One room was full of Commodore machines. Another room was full of TRS-80 machines. Another room had nothing but IBM PCs in it. And another one had, there's stuff everywhere. It was like, this house was basically a museum. So the gentleman's name is Gary Fisher. We've just become very good friends over the last few months. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about some of the machines that we collected. Hang on to your seatbelts. There's a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to do a little slideshow. And while we're doing the slideshow, we're going to be discussing all of the different machines that we collected. I don't have all of them in one spot, so we're just going to have to talk about what's in the photos. So you can see in here there's a whole bunch of everything. This is kind of what we saw when we first came into the living room. There's a whole bunch of compact Macs on the floor there. You can see there's like a 128, there was a 512, there's an SE. We didn't get any SE30s, but we have plenty of those already. You can also see in the background, there's like a Performa 520, I think it is, one of the all-in-ones. And if you look on the shelf in the background, you can also see there's an Altair machine there. There's a couple of the Tandy machines. This is just a small portion of what Gary had. And so, long story short, our friend Will, he basically purchased all of the Commodore stuff. And after Keith and I saw this collection, we decided that it would be a good idea for us to take all of the Apple stuff. So we came to an agreement and we just took all the Apple stuff. So we'll be doing lots more videos on different machines later. We have about 60 plus systems and they all need some degree of attention. Maybe it's just retrobrighting or cleaning. Most of the systems are still working. We've gone through most of them and all of them turn on for the most part. We haven't done exhaustive tests on everything, but we've basically done a basic, does it power on? Does it post? Is there video? Is the keyboard working? Very basic tests, but most of the machines that we've got are working. So we're just going to go through this slideshow. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're looking at, and we're formulating a list of all the machines that we have. What we're going to do with them. We hope to keep some of them. We also hope to sell some of them. So if there's anything here that you see that you might like, please let us know. This is being broadcast to YouTube Live as well as my Facebook link. So let's move on with the content. This is another angle of everything that was on the floor. You can see here there's more compacts, just a different angle of some of the compact Macs. You can also see here there's an LC2 in the box right there. Up above there you can see there's the Commodore. There's a couple pets. That's some of the things that Will got there. So we'll just keep going through these bit by bit. This was the main Apple room. So in here, you can see on the shelf, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. There's an iMac G5 up on top of that shelf. And beside that iMac is an Apple IIc system. And underneath the Apple IIc system, there's an Apple IIc Plus, which I've never seen in person before. So for those of you who know what an Apple IIc Plus is, it's the last version of the Apple IIc that Apple made. It does not have a 5 1/4 floppy, it has a 3.5 inch floppy. And it has a few other changes to it. I've just never seen one before. So we have one of those and we've tested it. It's working. We'll do some more tests on it later. On top of the other shelf there, you can see there's a bunch of Laser 128 computers, and peripherals. Laser was a Canadian company in the 80s, and they built clones of the Apple IIc. Some would argue that they made better versions of the Apple IIc. So in our collection, we have a Laser 128, and we also have two Laser 128EXs, which is an expanded version of the 128. Now, upon researching on the internet, there was an EX2, which had even more features, one of which was a built-in MIDI port for programming music. And the other thing was, I believe it's using a 3.5-inch floppy as well, like the Apple IIc Plus. Nonetheless, we received other peripherals. We have a 1 megabyte expansion memory card for the Laser, as well as an external floppy drive. So we've tested a few of those, and they will be for sale shortly. Underneath the top shelf on the right, you can see there's a lampshade iMac G4. I believe that we turned it on. I haven't done full exhaustive tests on it, but it's a lampshade. I believe it's 15-inch. That was from 2002. That machine came out. It's my favorite iMac design. It's kind of taken after the Pixar Luxo Junior lamp. If you've ever watched a Pixar movie, the lamp that does the jumping at the beginning in the credits, that's kind of what this iMac resembles. Beside the iMac G4, there's about I think there's 4 Apple IIgs systems. All of these systems are functional, and some of them have different expansion cards in them. One of them even has the CFFA compact flash hard drive, which is cool. And we also found, I think, 1 or 2 high-speed SCSI cards for the Apple IIgs. So we can actually hook up hard drives, CD-ROM drives, and other SCSI peripherals to the Apple IIgs systems, which is fantastic. Underneath the lampshade iMac, you can see there is a G4 cube. There was actually 3 of the cubes in our haul. All 3 of them are functioning. However, there are some optical drive issues, as the belts in the optical drives frequently break down and they have trouble inserting and ejecting. The cube has an auto inject, so that means when you put the disc in, it automatically will pull the disc once it detects it down into the mechanism. But over time, these belts can wear, and then you have trouble inserting and ejecting the optical drives. Beside the cubes, there's a few power supplies for the cubes, which is great. To the left of that, we see a G3 server. I'll just zoom in on this a little bit. PowerMac G3 server tower, which is pretty cool. It's missing a bezel on the front where the, I don't know if that's a second optical drive, but it says PowerMac G3 server on it, and it does work. Keith and I got it to function. We put a hard drive in it, and we installed macOS 8 point something on it, and it's working great. So it's a pretty powerful machine. We're glad that's working. Beside the G3 tower, we can see there's an LC, I think that's an LC2. Could just be a regular LC. Underneath that, there's a 2SI, and the 2SI is working. And the 2SI also has what's called a radius pivot card, which is a really popular video card that you can actually use in an SE30. However, for it to fit in an SE30, you actually have to physically cut the edge of the card so it fits inside the bucket. There is a pivot card for the SE30, but it's very large and bulky, and that's why collectors like the Pivot 2SI card, because it's very narrow. Matter of fact, I think I have one right here. Let me just see if I can find it. Here it is. So this is a Pivot 2SI card here. Sorry, I'm kind of backwards. So this card is kind of rectangular, and it comes with this the DB15 connector there by Radius. So these cards are very sought after for collectors, and you can see the top of this card has been trimmed, but no traces have been damaged. So when you plug this into an SE30, you can actually do 832 by 624 resolution, which is really cool. So that's the Radius pivot card. And the very fun toy to play with if you're an SE30 collector. Beside the 2SI and the LC system, there's a 5 1/4 drive. We have a lot of drives to go through, a whole bunch of floppy drives that will need probably testing, maybe some repairing or calibration, cleaning, lubrication, if nothing else. All right, underneath that, you can see there's a Bondi Blue iMac, which is the original iMac from 1998 when Steve Jobs returned and saved Apple with that machine. Beside that Bondi iMac, you can see there's a Classic, just a regular Classic system. I believe that system is working. Underneath the Classic, you can see there's a purple iMac, and I believe that is looks like a slot loader. The original Bondi iMac, Steve Jobs actually wanted it to be slot loading, and for whatever reason, they didn't have slot loading drives at the time, and apparently he wasn't too happy about it. So the second generation of iMacs did have slot loading optical drives. Some of you might remember the commercials for rip, mix, and burn. And when CD writable technology came out, you could make your own mixtapes on a CD, which was very fun and popular. Go check out those rip, mix, burn ads. There's a bunch of cool musical celebrities. I remember there's one with Smash Mouth and a whole bunch of other people. It's pretty neat. All right, just moving over a bit here, you can see there's that big stack of 5 1/4 Unidiscs. We've got a lot of them. Looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 of them there, and to be honest with you, I think there's even more. We just kind of lost track after a while. There's so many peripherals. There's mice, there's keyboards, there's cables. It was just unreal the amount of stuff that we came across. So that's some of the stuff that's going on there. Actually, there's a couple other things I'll mention. On the bottom of that shelf, you can see there's another laser system there. On top of the laser is an MPF3. I've got some pictures of that coming up here. This is going to be a long broadcast, so hang on to your hats. This is way overdue, so I got to make sure we're exhausting all this content here. The Microprofessor 3 is a very rare clone of an Apple IIe. We'll talk more about it later. I've got some photos, and we'll sort of take a look at the logic board. I'd never heard of this thing before, but it is an Apple IIe compatible box, and we'll take a look at that later. Underneath the Microprofessor box, there's one of those Laser 128EXs. Underneath the Laser 128EX, there is something called, it's an Apple One kit. I can't remember the brand of it, but I do have a picture of that in the slideshow as well, so we'll look at that. Underneath the Apple One kit, guess what's in that box at the bottom? That is an original Apple II box. We're talking retail packaging. When you bought an Apple II, that's the box that it came in. And we have 2 of these systems you'll see in the slideshow later. Both the systems that have the boxes with them are matching serial numbers, which is crazy cool. So I remember when I was like, I think 10 years old, my dad bought an Apple II Plus in like 1980 sometime. And I remember coming down the stairs, watching cartoons on a Saturday morning, and there was this box. I'm like, what the heck is this? And my dad said, well, it's a computer. And so I remember taking this box apart and pulling the computer out of it. So to have the same retail packaging as what I opened up some 40-some years ago is pretty nostalgic and very cool. So I'm glad that whoever had this Apple system preserved the original retail packaging. I have some more detailed pictures of that later, but that's one of my favorite things in the collection is that Apple II in the original box. We also have another Apple II Plus in the box too. We'll show that later in the slideshow. All right, moving on. This is some of the stuff that was in the front room. We didn't get everything that Gary had. He kept that Performa system there. He hung on to that because that was his favorite machine. You can see he has 2 floppy drives on top of it. You can actually run the Apple IIe card in here because there's an LC PDS slot inside of this Performa, and he was keeping his 2E card for that. But anyways, just to give you an idea of how much stuff was being collected. There's some logic boards at the top of the shelf here. You can see various logic boards. I haven't gone through these yet. Keith and I have sort of cataloged them, but I think there's maybe an SE30 board there, a couple other, there's lots of boards going on. Really, there's a lot of stuff that we haven't exhaustively gone through yet. Let's keep on going here. This is another angle of the room that we looked at a moment ago. If you look to the left, I'll just zoom in here to get your attention. On the shelf, those are more Apple IIe systems. We had a number of Apple IIe systems in this collection. Some of them are regular 2Es, some of them are 2E enhanced, and we even have a few 2E platinum. So for those of you unfamiliar with the Apple IIe system, there's like 3 different versions. Regular 2E, then there was the 2E enhanced, and then there was the 2E platinum. The 2E platinum is the last version of the Apple II that was manufactured, and it has a keyboard as well as a numeric keypad on the front, whereas a normal 2E, like the one behind me, just has a regular keyboard and no keypad. Interestingly enough, there is a numeric keypad port in the 2E, and I do believe that in our collection we actually did get a numeric keypad, and you can plug it into the numeric keypad port on the 2E and run it out the back. So for those people who are really business oriented in the 80s, most people would like to have the numeric keypad for business purposes. So that's a little zoom in on that. I don't see it in the picture here, but one of my favorite things that we got in the collection was called a silent type. And a silent type was a thermal printer. So for those of you familiar with old printing technology, thermal paper came in a roll, and the silent type, most printers back then were like, they made all kinds of racket, but the silent type is like totally quiet. It just quietly, thermally prints the image onto the paper, and it doesn't make much noise at all. Hopefully we can get that thing up and running, because my brother had one when I was growing up, and I remember being fascinated with it. The silent type does have its own interface card. I think the card we have might just be for the Apple III, but I'm not entirely sure. The silent type printer is a bit of a unique thing in that you can't just plug it into the computer. It needs a special interface to function properly. In the background, you can see there's a bunch of stuff on the shelves there. Most of this stuff was in the kind of accessories category, a lot of keyboards, a lot of mice, a lot of network cables, things like that. In the background, you can see there's another cube on the shelf there. Luckily, there are some cube speakers. Usually when you find a cube, the speakers do not come with it. So the only issue with cube speakers is the rubber around the speakers usually has deteriorated and may need rebuilding. So I don't know that we've tested these speakers yet, but it's a good idea to rebuild them anyways, just because they're literally 20-some years old. If you look closely, you can see there's a silent type printer on top of the shelf, and there's a, looks like an original Indigo iBook beside the cube, which I don't think I've tested yet. I'm not sure if Keith has either, but I really like the original. They call them toilet seats because they look like it, but they have this cool handle integrated into them. I have a graphite version of that with Firewire, a special edition 466. So that, and you can also see there's another white iMac there. You can see the magnetic Apple remote hanging off the side, which is cool. I think, I haven't tested that machine. I think it works. And then over here we have a great Color Classic. So Keith and I are big fans of the Color Classic. We've been collecting quite a few of them. We're building several Mystics. For those of you who know what a Mystic is a Color Classic that's been upgraded with a 575 logic board. So I have one of those here, just behind me. This is the 575 logic board here. And this has an 040 processor. It's got an LCPDS slot, so you can put different cards in there. When you put this into a Color Classic, it just becomes crazy fast. And what other people like to do is, if you mod the analog board on a Color Classic, you can actually change the resolution to a full 640 by 480. What that does is it lets you run different types of games. Some games won't work if they don't detect 640 by 480 resolution. So Color Classic's one of my favorite machines. I love toying with them, tinkering with them, modding them, putting in really low latency video RAM. You can overclock them. And something else I will show you later is I have a PowerPC card that actually makes the Mystic a PowerPC Mystic. So you can switch between the 040 processor and the PowerPC 601 processor. So as we speak, I have a bid on another Mystic that has the PowerPC card on it. There's two versions of the PowerPC card. One is 66 megahertz 601 and the other is 100. The 100 megahertz is particularly rare, and you can't really see what the speed is because the heat sinks on top of it, and it's just, you just have to hope for the best. So we'll see what happens there, but that is the 575 logic board for you. So Color Classic, and there's a keyboard there. You see it's an Apple extended keyboard. We got several of those. Those have very nice switches in them. You can also see underneath there's some boxes of stuff down here. In one of these boxes is a full Apple IIc system, complete with the monitor stand, the monitor, just like I have here, the 9-inch monochrome, the monitor stand. It also has an image writer too with an adapter cable. So we have a full IIc system in the box underneath this table here. It's just madness how much stuff that we had. Over here, just more peripherals. There's a couple of, I think, iBooks in there. Like I said, there's stuff everywhere. And you can see in the background, there's a whole bunch of software. ClarisWorks, Adobe Illustrator, now up to date, SimCity 2000, all sorts of crazy software. Most of these boxes have software in them. There's another wall with nothing but documentation, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. Hope you're still interested. There's a lot of stuff to go through here, but literally this is like the collection that we got. This gentleman, Gary, had been collecting a lot of machines and a lot of manuals and software and documentation for a very long time. He even has a poster. Actually, I'll show it to you right now. This is pretty cool. I just noticed this on the wall when I went to visit him last, because he's now selling his house. He had to sell the house because you can't insure a house that has a bunch of computers in it. It has to be inhabited, and it was basically a museum. But for those of you who can see, this is a calendar. It says 1982 Gabelli. So Nasser Gabelli was a computer programmer who wrote some really amazing games for the Apple II. So if you're running old Apple II games on your Apple II, if you're playing any old games, there's a good chance this guy's name might be on the game. So there's one game he wrote called Firebird. It's one of my favorite games. It's where a building's on fire and you have to move a fireman to put out the fires before they destroy the building. And as you play, it gets faster and faster and more intense. You can move up, down, left, and right. Check it out, Firebird. But I saw this poster and I asked Gary, oh, can I have that? And he said, certainly you can. So the cool thing about this, ladies and gentlemen, is this 1982, Gary got this at the VCF, like an old computer festival in 1982. So this poster is literally 42, 43 years old, and he still had it. So I'm like, yeah, I totally know who that guy is. Please let me have it. So he gave me the poster. So I just wanted to throw that in. Any games for the Apple II, check out the name Nasser Gabelli. He's legendary game programmer. So let's keep moving ahead here. This is one of the crown jewels of the collection. So for those of you who don't know, this is an Apple III. And on top of the Apple III is what's called a profile. And the profile is a 5 megabyte hard drive that Apple designed. And it was designed to work with the Apple III, but it was also designed to work with the Lisa. Now, we don't have any Lisas in our collection. I don't know that I want to get one. They're quite technical to fix. And anyways, I'd never seen an Apple III in person since like 1980, whenever they came out. We had a computer land in Medicine Hat where I grew up, and we had a local dealer called Total Computers. That's actually where I bought my first Mockingbird from. But I remember that's the last time I saw an Apple III. I never saw one after that. The Apple III was deemed a bit of a failure. Apple was trying to break into the business market, and there was a lot of tension between the Apple camp for the Apple II, Apple III, and the Macintosh camp, which derived from the Lisa project that was also very expensive. So the Macintosh was a lower cost version of the Lisa. And if you have an older Lisa, you can actually do mods to it so it can run Macintosh software. But nonetheless, this Apple III system was very unique, not because it was an Apple III per se, but it's an Apple III Plus. And so the Apple III Plus was it was the last Apple machine that they made before they kind of committed to the Mac and I guess to some degree the 2GS. But the Apple III Plus, we have 3 Apple III systems. There was 3 of them in this collection. One of them is an Apple III regular. The Apple III came with 64, 128, or 256 kilobytes of RAM. The Apple III Plus could be configured with 256 or 512 kilobytes of RAM. The one that we have is marked as 256. And I'm not sure how difficult it would be to bump it up to 512. But anyway, an Apple III Plus is pretty rare, and Gary had one in his collection. So thankfully we have it now. We're testing it. We're going to get the profile drive working with it. And we also have the matching monitor 3 to go with it. We've got another slide of that coming up. So the Apple III Plus and the profile hard drive, probably the most unique in the entire collection for me. The Apple III had problems with its memory chips. Sometimes you'd get an error. As a matter of fact, Keith got an error when he was testing the RAM. One of the chips was bad. But it's not that the chips are bad, it's just that they're loose. Apparently, legend has it that when people had problems with their Apple III, they would bring it to a dealer or an Apple authorized service provider, and they would literally drop the Apple III on the counter to reseat all the chips. And I don't know if that's true or not. That sounds kind of crazy. But imagine like, how can I take this machine seriously when you're reseating chips by just dropping it on a counter? But that's what Keith found. He said some of these chips are so loose that if they're not socketed properly, it's like, sorry, you got a RAM error. So I don't know if there's a way to tighten up these RAM chips to make them not pop out. Very interesting story. I'd love to see your comments about that. If you have some thoughts on the Apple III problems. So we have 3 Apple IIIs. I can't remember the memory configuration. One of the Apple IIIs we have has a floppy problem, but we do have an external floppy 3. So I'm going to do some testing with that maybe on the weekend and see if we can transplant the mechanism that's in the external. If it's working, I'll put it inside of the Apple III, and maybe we'll figure out why the other one's not working. Maybe it's a belt. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. I don't know much about the Apple III, so we're just going to be going by some YouTube videos. Some of other Apple vintage streamers have talked about the Apple III, but this is sort of new territory. So hopefully we can get all 3 of our Apple IIIs working. 2 of them are working. One of them doesn't want to work because of a floppy issue, but we'll get back to you on that. All right, that's another picture of the Color Classic. We'll just skip that. That's another angle of the LC and Power Mac G3. We saw that. This is kind of the documentation wall. There's some goodies in here. It was pretty cool. You can see there's a Microsoft Z80 soft card. So one of the cool things in the early 80s was Microsoft designed Z80 cards, and Z80 card allowed you to run CP/M, which was a very popular business operating system back in the day. And that MPF3, that Apple clone, I'll show you later. It's got a built-in Z80 card, which is kind of neat. You can see here there's manuals, there's technical information inside Macintosh, a lot of reference, Apple 2GS. There's just a lot of documentation here. So if there's anything in here that you think is interesting or you would like to perhaps secure, give us a message and let us know. You can see there's boxes of Mac OS 8.5, Lotus Jazz. Check that out. That's pretty wild. That's for the original Macintosh. FileMaker Pro Server, ClarisWorks, Microsoft Word, all kinds of vintage software in here. And I'll show you another cool picture in a second of something I think is particularly interesting. This is one of my favorite things that we found, a boxed copy of Wizardry. So for those of you who don't know, Wizardry was an amazing, I don't know if it was the first, but it might have been the first 3D maze crawler Dungeons and Dragons game. So you built a party of up to six people. You could have fighters, mages, priests, thieves. You could build up their armor class, and you ran into different enemies and stuff like that. For those of you interested, if you have a Nintendo Switch, they actually rebooted Wizardry last year with a complete visual overhaul. And the great thing about this, folks, is it runs on top of the original Wizardry engine. So they've taken all the Pascal code that was in the Apple II version, and they just put a big layer of graphics and sound over top of it. And what's really neat is when you're playing the game on the Nintendo Switch, you can actually have the Apple II graphics kind of overlaid on top. Wonderful things that people are doing with technology lately, just putting facelifts on classic games. If you've not played Wizardry, I recommend you check it out. It's very cool. And just the packaging, like the box, the red and the green and the black. I miss physical packaging, and I miss CD artwork, album artwork, game artwork. We'll take a look at that in a bit. We've got some more artwork I'd like to share with you. So we'll keep moving here. How the heck are we going to get all this stuff out of here? Well, thank goodness for Home Depot. Keith said, we got to go get some bins so that we can transport all of this stuff. So I went ahead and bought 22 of these, and I think we bought like another 12 after that because all these buckets were full of stuff. Hardware, software, keyboards, cables, you name it. We had to put it somewhere. So I have a nice gear trailer for moving my musical equipment, and it has a lot of space. So that's a picture of what the bins looked like in my trailer before we filled them all up. There's another picture of the Apple III system. You'll notice the Apple III keyboard here is different. The Apple III Plus keyboard is like the 2E keyboard of the later generations. So the original Apple III keyboard has bigger keycaps, so a little bulkier. There's another picture of another Apple III system and an Apple IIe system. You can see there on top there's a system saver fan. So for those of you remember, Kensington made system savers that sat on the side of your Apple II, and they would take the air would pull the hot air out of the computer so it wouldn't overheat. Another thing cool here is on top of the Apple III, you'll notice there's a bit of a hairline crack there where the floppy drive is. And then there's also the external floppy 3 drive. I'm hoping that works, because if it does, we might take the mechanism out of that and transplant it inside of the Apple III and fix the external one later. So yeah, 3, and you'll notice here, he also gave us this extra memory chips, because if the Apple III memory chips failed, we would need to replace them. And so that's why we got some extra chips here apparently. We have not tested them yet, but they're there if we need to, so that's good news. Here's another picture in the hallway of stuff going out the door. You can see at the front, we also got some more modern equipment. There's that Indigo iBook I was telling you about before with the classic yo-yo adapter. Underneath that, there's 2 G4 towers. One of them I think is empty. There's nothing in it. It's just a shell. And then behind that, you can see there's a whole bunch of software. There's Doom. There's Toast. Yeah, whole bunches of stuff. We got some soft PC stuff going on. And then on top of that, you can see there's a 2GS monitor there, that RGB monitor. Those are really nice monitors, by the way. If you've ever used an Apple 2GS, the RGB monitor that goes with the 2GS is a beautiful, beautiful unit. And then on top of here, you can see there's another G4 tower. So lots of stuff going on there. I really like this box. There's in the back, you can see there is a couple things here. Number one, I did a video on this earlier, and I was still working on that, but there's a Mockingbird kit. So I'm still working on assembling the Mockingboard, and once it's assembled, we're going to test it in my 2E behind me here. We're going to run a few games. We'll do a demonstration of how the Mockingboard works. And another cool thing was, recently when I was at Keith's looking through some of the software that we got, we actually found an original music construction set floppy. And music construction set it makes use of the Mockingboard. So I remember as a kid, I would compose music on an Apple II using music construction set written by Will Harvey from Electronic Arts. And what we would do is you could tell music construction set, hey, I want to use the Mockingboard to do all my voices. So the Mockingboard can output 6 different sounds simultaneously. So I'm very excited about putting that Mockingboard back together. It's a kit from Retroactive Micro. Check that out if you need your own Mockingboard. And then in the other, just in front of that on the box, there's something called an Echo. So the Echo is actually a speech system for the Apple. So it comes with, there's 3 pieces. There's the card that goes in the Apple II, and there's a cable that goes to a speaker, and then there's a disc that lets you test how the Echo works. So the Echo has a speech chip in it. I think it's Texas Instruments. Later on, we're planning on doing a video where we're gonna get the Apple II to talk to Siri and see if they can have a conversation with each other. So that's gonna be fun. So the Echo speech system was pretty neat, and then the Mockingboard kit, I was pretty excited about that because get my soldering skills up to par, put together a Mockingboard, and we'll actually test it. And I do have some songs that I composed on a floppy somewhere. I think I've got them backed up, but I'd love to actually load the songs that I did from 1982 into Music Construction Set and play them through the Mockingboard for you. So that's another cool video we're looking forward to doing. All right. Okay, this is pretty neat. So we've got cassettes, folks. These cassettes are literally what the Apple first used. There was no disk drives when the Apple first came out. And so what you had to do is you had to load programs from a cassette. And so you can see we've got Breakout, and we also have something called Little Brickout. And then beside that we have AppleSoft 2E, which is interesting, and then high resolution graphics. So I think there might be programs on the back sides of these as well. I can't remember what there is. But seeing these cassettes made me feel warm and fuzzy because I remember putting a cassette into a player, hitting play, and then typing in load on the Apple keyboard, and then would load the program from a cassette like a caveman, and you sat there and waited for several minutes for this program to load. And if you had a volume issue, there would be an error and it wouldn't load and you have to try again. Anyway, this is what I call the original App Store right here. You bought cassettes to load programs. There was Star Trek, Star Wars, an infinite number of monkeys, Apple Vision. There's a whole bunch of these cassettes that are archived online, and you can actually download the contents because it's just audio. You can actually, a friend of mine is going to rebuild one of my Walkmans. And once he rebuilds it, we're going to practice taking some of these cassettes and loading them from my Sony Walkman into an Apple, and we'll see how that goes. But we got 4 cassettes here that are legit Apple cassettes. So when I saw these, I was like, wow, that is super cool. We're talking like 1977, 78 here. So moving on, with Apple Share Server 3.0. This is just something I thought was interesting. A friend of mine, I think, might have been interested in this, but there's a picture of me, just all the stuff in my Jeep. We're moving a lot of stuff around. There's stuff in my trailer and there's stuff in the Jeep, and I'm just kind of making a funny face here because where are we going to put all this stuff? There's that classic system just beside me. Okay, we are moving on. This is the Apple II Plus that we found. It was one thing to find a serial matched Apple II Plus, but look at all the cards in this thing. It's got like so many cards. And I'm not even sure what some of these cards do, to be honest with you. It looks to me like we've got I think there's an 80 column card in here. I think there's a RAM card in here. I think there might be a Super Serial card, Zebex Systems, Apple host adapter. I really don't know what's going on in here, but I know there's a lot of cards and a lot of cables. But let's keep moving on. All right, remember that serial number matching business I was telling you about? Well, this is it. It says Apple to, and then it has plus on here, and it's got the serial number, which is 184557. Not the earliest Apple II we've seen, but nonetheless, that's pretty cool. What I really like about this box, folks, is that there's 3 check boxes. There's 16K, 32K, and 48K. So depending on which Apple you bought, you had it configured with a different amount of RAM. When my dad got the Apple II Plus back in like 1980, the Apple II Plus came with 48K, and you could expand it to 16 using a language card, which we have several of those here. So it's pretty neat to see the serial number, to also see the 48K box checked, and you also see the word plus over here. So we know that this was an Apple II Plus. It says plus on the lid, which is also obvious. So matching serial number box, and there you go there. So on the bottom, you have different model numbers, and this model number was A2S1048. So you can see the model numbers correspond with the amount of RAM that came with each of these machines. So early Apple serial numbers, if you've got a really old one, they have different revision numbers, but this one here says 184557. So it's a 6-figure serial number. If you have an Apple II that has a 5-figure serial number or even a 4, that's really early. Nonetheless, we're very happy to have this. It's a serial matched Apple II Plus with the box, and this is the really cool part. This Apple II Plus comes with the original box that has all the accessories. And so you can see we've got the AppleSoft tutorial manual there. We've got the DOS manual there. There's another Apple manual underneath that. And over here we have, look at this. This is an RF modulator. So this let you use your Apple II with a normal television by connecting the 2 plugs there, which is really neat. The cool thing that I found about this is these Apple paddles. Like, these are pretty rare. Like, you don't see these everywhere. You have to be careful with these too. If you look closely, you can see the pins here. When you inserted this into the logic board, you had to be careful not to bend these pins, otherwise your joystick wouldn't work anymore. So it's a very delicate connector, but that connector was what interfaced both of those paddles with your Apple II. So how cool is it that we have the original accessory box with manuals, RF modulator, and the paddles to go with this? Like, I don't even want to sell this because it's so unique and so special. So that is the Apple II Plus with the matching serial number. And you can see here, here's 2 Apple II boxes. One is the Apple II regular, and the other one's an Apple II Plus. So having the original boxes for these, you can see there's a bit of water stains on that one there. But how great is it to have these boxes that are literally, almost 50 years old, still intact? They're a little beat up, but they're still intact, and they've got the foam insulation inside, and I just think that's really cool. This is a picture of our storage space, which is, we had to get all those bins because there's so much stuff. We just wanted to make sure we had the room to put it all in. So we're, like I said, we're slowly going through everything. Here's another view of our testing. We basically have an Apple III with the profile and the Monitor 3 as a complete system. And you can see here that's the Apple III Plus. You can also see it's got the nice Platinum 2E style keyboard there. You'll see it says, instead of caps lock, it says Alpha Lock, which is interesting. So it's kind of neat. Weird thing about the Apple III, there's a little LED here, and if that LED doesn't, if the LED is broken, the computer won't boot. So it's very strange. The computer will turn on, but it won't let you do anything. So you have to actually replace that LED. Otherwise, the computer's not happy. So That Apple III Plus, like I said, we're doing some more testing, but what a beautiful system that is. Matching Apple III with the Profile and a Monitor 3. The Monitor 3 works, the Profile works, the Apple III Plus works. We just have to get the Profile hard disk to talk to the Apple III. We do have the interface card, but uncharted territory, as Keith and I have not done this before. But anyways, if you're interested in an Apple III system, this is pretty darn slick. So the floppy drive works. I believe it's got 256K of RAM, and the Profile drive does power up, and the Monitor 3 looks great. So that's a pretty special system right there. We have 3 Monitor 3s, and we have 3 Apple 3s, and we have the 1 Profile hard drive. So that's pretty cool. This was something that was kind of neat. Keith was taking a look at all of our compacts, and one of the SEs that we had this very unique accelerator in it. You can see it says Radius here. So Radius made monitors. They made accelerator cards for Compact Macs back in the day. You can see here it says 1988 Radius Incorporated ROMs. So what this did was this gave your SE 68020, which was interesting, and then a coprocessor beside it, 68881 it looks like. So I'm not sure how much faster this made the SE, but a very unique accelerator nonetheless. I don't know. I think we're probably selling that, but I just wanted to show it to you because I'd never seen anything like this before. Compact Mac accelerators are very interesting to me. So sorry about that. I jumped out of my slideshow. And you can see here when you boot that, you get the little thing on the screen saying Radius Accelerator 1988 Radius version 2.0. So that's kind of neat. This is that Apple I kit that I was talking to you about. So you can see here it has everything you need to build your own Apple I replica. The only thing I don't like about this kit is that the keyboard is really different than what the old Apple I would come with. Traditional Apple I enthusiasts will use an Apple II keyboard from Datanetics because it's the one that everyone kind of used. This keyboard here has a lot of extra weird keys on it, so I'm not so thrilled about that idea. There is a PCB underneath the cardboard, and you can see here there's all of the hardware and passive parts kits. There's a bunch of sockets you got to solder onto it. There's all the sockets there. There's the stand core isolation transformer. All the parts you need to make a functioning Apple I replica are in this box. So that's going to take some more effort than the Mockingboard. The Mockingboard's much simpler, but I'm actually thinking of hiring someone to make me a koa wood case like the original Byte Shop had back in the early 70s when Steve Jobs and Wozniak made the Apple I. They presented it to the Byte Shop owner, but they didn't have a case for it. And so what someone did was they made this kind of exotic koa wood case to put all the stuff in. And then anyway, that's something that's pretty neat in our collection. An Apple I kit is something that interested me, so I'm actually excited about putting this together. I don't know if I'll be able to do it all myself. I might get Keith to help me, but do want to get a proper Apple II keyboard for this because this keyboard's a little weird. Nonetheless, that's a really neat thing there, an Apple I replica kit. This I'm particularly excited about. I'm not going to do it right now, but I do want to show you something. Just give me 1 second. All right, this is the goofiest thing. So I've been told that this works, and we're not going to test it right now, but I want to show it to you because I love pushing the limit, and I love seeing what can be hooked up to what. So we have, this is a Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2 adapter. Then we have Thunderbolt 2 to FireWire 800 adapter. Then we have a FireWire 800 to a FireWire 400 connector, which then goes into this SCSI to FireWire converter box, which then goes to this massive Centronics SCSI connector. So underneath the Apple IIe over here, I have the original 20 SC hard drive from Apple. It's a 20 megabyte hard drive. It was the first hard drive they made, and it actually has the Centronics SCSI interface on it. So in another video, we're going to take the 20 SC and we're going to hook up all this nonsense, and we're going to see if we can mount the 20 SC with my 14-inch MacBook Pro, M1 Pro. If we can do that, I will be giddy like crazy, because I've heard you can do it, but I'm also curious if you can write to it or if you can just read from it. If you can write to it, then I'll really be blown away. But if any of you have ever done this, I'd love to know your feedback. But this is a dongle paradise. You've got Thunderbolt 3 to 2, Thunderbolt 2 to FireWire, FireWire 800 to 400, and then this wild box here, which I'm hoping is bus powered, because I don't know what kind of power supply it needs. If it does need it, it's got a little jack in the back, but I'm hoping it's just powered through the FireWire bus or Thunderbolt itself. So the big question is there, can we use this FireWire to SCSI converter to make a brand new Mac talk to the oldest SCSI peripheral there is? Stay tuned. We'll take a look at that another time. All right, so FireWire to SCSI converter. That was one of the cooler things I saw right. I'm like, oh, I want to play with that. That's going to be very interesting. So, remember that artwork thing we talked about? This was some of the software and packaging that we came across. I really like vintage electronic arts stuff. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. So I'm not sure what the difference with instant music is, but it says here Apple II GS mouse required. So instant music is, maybe it's an advanced version of music construction set that runs on the 2GS only. So the 2GS stands for graphics and sound, and it had what's called an Ensoniq chip. And Ensoniq was a company who made professional synthesizers and samplers in the 80s, and Apple teamed up with Ensoniq to use their technology in the GS. So I've never fully explored what that chip can do in the 2GS. If any of you have, I'd love to hear about it. I remember there was a demo for the 2GS. It was like an animated version of, I think, the Flintstones or something. I haven't been able to find it, but if any of you know about it, I'd love to see that again. Ray Toby's Skyfox. So this Skyfox game actually is one of the games that makes use of the Mockingboard. So when the Mockingboard is done, we will use Skyfox to demo it, because the Skyfox will recognize, oh, there's a Mockingboard in here, and it will output its sound to the Mockingboard while you're playing the game. So that's pretty cool. Love the artwork for pinball construction set. You can see the pinball there. You can see the reflection of, you can make your own pinball game, basically, is how it worked. So you got to create your own pinball machine. You could move bumpers and different things on the screen, and you made your own pinball game. So it was pretty neat. How many people remember the Bard's Tale? This was another one of those Dungeons and Dragons games. It was kind of like Wizardry, but maybe a little more advanced. I never played it that much myself, but I do know it was popular. There was a Bard's Tale 2 and I believe a Bard's Tale 3. We have the Bard's Tale original here. I don't remember if there's discs in these packages. I think there is, but we'll double check that later. Another fun adventure game, The 7 Cities of Gold. I never played this, but I was familiar with it. For those of you who are vintage electronic arts fans, you should probably find this fairly interesting, to have the original artwork and packaging for these games. Recently, in the last video I showed you, I found the packaging for One-on-One, which was Dr. J and Julius Irving. There was no disc for that, but just having the packaging is pretty cool. So this was some of the software that was in our collection that I found particularly interesting. In here, this was this is very interesting. It's a little letter, September 1st, 1983, and it actually talks to developers about ProDOS. So ProDOS was something that Apple developed for Apple IIe's and 2 Pluses, and it was just an advanced operating system for managing file management. And this letter was written to developers. It says here, Apple Computer will announce ProDOS this fall at Comdex 83. So Comdex was a big trade show back in the day where all the computer people were hawking their wares and showing off their new thing. Quick little side note, for those of you who have not watched Halt and Catch Fire, I would strongly recommend you check it out. I think you can watch it on Netflix, but it's a semi-factual story about the PC cloning business of the early 80s. So check out Halt and Catch Fire. Strongly recommend it for any vintage computer enthusiast. It's a wonderful, wonderful show. There's, I think, 4 seasons of it. This is a picture of Gary's office once we had sort of emptied out a bunch of it. So all the software that was on that shelf is now gone. Again, stuff has been kind of moved out. Everything that was there is now kind of not there anymore. Yeah. So Keith and I worked very diligently to get all the Apple stuff out of Gary's house in a matter of like 2 or 3 days. You can see there's a monitor. We got several of those monitors there. That's the rotational angle. You could move the picture up or down. Usually that was found in schools with Apple IIe systems. There's all that laser 128 stuff down there again that we looked at before, just a bit of a better picture. This is kind of the leftovers from the main room there. You can see on the bottom, we also had a couple, I think, G5s and Mac Pros in our collection. And I believe on top of the table there's 3 iBooks there. I think they're iBook G3s. I don't know if they're iBook G4s, that'd be cool because iBook G4s are fairly rare. I do have a PowerBook G4 12-inch myself from my own collection that I really like. Behind those 3 iBooks is, you can see there's a Mac Mini there. It's an older style Mac Mini. I don't know if that's PowerPC or Intel. Again, there's just so much stuff. We haven't had time to look at everything. It's just been crazy. So yeah, lots of different systems there. This is more of the stuff sort of on the way out. You see those, there's a monitor 3 there on top. There's another monitor 2. I think some of the stuff was from schools because you can see that there's some writing on the top of them. Schools would often tag their assets with either engraving or with an actual Sharpie marking. There's more stuff on the way out, more bins, more buckets of things. You can see there, there's a Apple Personal Diagnostics. There's some IIe discs. And what's neat about underneath that, you can see there's an Apple box. That's an actual Apple Disc 2 box. Unfortunately, there's no packaging in it, but that's the box that an original Apple II Disc 2 floppy drive would come in. So that's pretty neat. Let's keep moving on here. This is kind of the end of the road as far as getting stuff out. We couldn't get everything in one haul, so we would have to come back. So we just kind of moved stuff from one room to the other, so it was easier to organize. You can see on the floor there's an Image Writer 2. We had several Image Writer 2s. They're stacked on top of each other. A big box of computer paper for tractor feed, which is very useful if you're printing banners in print shop. You can also see here there is several Style Writer 2s. There's one there. There's another 2 there. There's another Image Writer 2. Yeah, it's just, there's a lot of stuff going on. Some of these monitors are getting power, but no high voltage, so we'd have to go and take a look at those. In the background, there's that Apple III with the external floppy drive 3. Interestingly enough, the Apple III external floppy doesn't plug into all the Apple IIIs. The Apple III Plus has different ports on the back. So when I get to testing that, we'll be mindful of that. Let's see what else is going on here. There's that software again, diagnostics, system utilities, those Apple III chips. This is the trailer with some of the buckets loaded up with all of the goodies that we have. Like I said, hardware, software. We actually had some packing blankets for moving some of the Apple IIe's were just a little too tall on their sides for the lid to to be put on top. So we use some blankets just to protect them from getting banged around too much. And you can see here the storage facility is getting fuller and fuller with all of the buckets of material. This was something here that I have right now. Something I've always wanted is a 128K Mac. I got one in Edmonton that I thought was a 128, but when I took it apart, I think you saw the other video I did, it actually had been upgraded to a 512, which is not a big deal, but for sentimental reasons, I kind of wanted to have a 128 of some kind. And so when Keith and I were dissecting all these compacts, he happened to find this really wild RAM expansion. So this is called Max a Million. And you can see only one row of chips is populated. The other two rows are not populated. But look what I have. This is that same chip. I've got a whole bunch of chips in here that will go in those slots. And these chips have a lower latency than the chips that are in this RAM expansion. As to how much it's going to speed it up, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm excited to populate this RAM expansion with all these extra chips just to see how much RAM we have. So a 128K Mac, I think that when we put all these chips in, it'll be close to 2 megabytes of RAM, which is healthy if you want to run older OSs like Mac OS 6.0.8. If you're trying to run System 7, I don't know how much RAM you need for that, but you probably want to stick to 6 if you're limited in your RAM. So anyway, be watching for a video with that. We're going to populate this Max a Million card with all of the chips. We're going to take the slow chips out and we're going to put the faster latency chips in the entire thing, and then we'll test it. We'll test it before and after to see what the difference is. The cool thing about these old compact Macs is we got two, not one, but two HD20s. So an HD20 is a hard drive that Apple made that worked with the original 128, 512, 512KE, and the Plus. So it's not a SCSI drive, it's just an old, I think it's MFM technology, but we have two of them and they both spin up and they both work. And if you have a custom RAM for the SE30, you can also use the HD20 on an SE30 too. So if you have a floppy EMU, the floppy EMU has an HD20 function. So if any of you have compact Macs out there and you like collecting and testing, I would highly recommend that you get a floppy EMU. Visit bigmessofwires.com and they have them for sale there. I absolutely love mine. I've got two of them and I'm thinking of getting a third one. As a matter of fact, I just gave Keith my old one. It was one with the red display, a Rev A, and I had accidentally burned it out because I like plugging things in when the computer's on and you're not supposed to do that. So I gave it to him saying, hey, if you can fix this, you can have it. And he resurrected it. So he has the old red screen Rev A floppy EMU. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, the Max a Million RAM expansion, it's huge. We'll be populating that a little bit later with the Mac behind me here, that guy. Okay, this is one of the more odd ducks of the collection. In one of the Apple IIIs, we found these two cards, and one of them is called a 3+2E, and the other one says 3+2. Not entirely sure what these cards do or why we need both of them, but based on my research, the 3+2E makes your Apple III a full-blown 2E. Now, the reason I find this interesting is because the Apple III does have an Apple II emulation mode where you can just run Apple II software on it. So I'm not totally sure of the benefit of having a hardware card that does it anyways. Maybe it makes it a lot faster. Not totally sure. If you know something about that, we'd love to hear from you about your experience. These are fairly rare, these cards, apparently. And if we want to take these cards out, we have to take the video ROM out of one of the cards and put it back into the Apple III logic board. Otherwise, it won't boot. You can't see what you're doing. So anyway, it's by a company called Titan Technologies. They made this Apple 3+2E card to enhance the capability of your Apple III. All right, here's a bunch of the stuff once we moved it into Keith's basement for testing. Some of the stuff in the background belongs to Keith's collection, but everything on the floor and that table is what we picked up. So you can imagine our there's a lot of stuff going on here. So there's that RGB monitor. We got an eMac there as well. There's a Color Classic back there. Lots of keyboards, more monitors. It's just bedlam. There's that Apple III system with the profile and the Monitor 3. Yeah, there's just stuff everywhere. On top of the table, you can see some of the compacts. There's a 2GS. We got a 2GS logic board that apparently works, which is no case for it. We also got an LC3 in the box. We have an LC2, an LC3, and an LC475, I think, in boxes. They're not pictured here. But these are all the compacts that we collected, and Keith has done some testing on those already. I think most of them are working. Some of them just might need some retro brighting or maybe some other TLC. A lot of machines to play with. And so we're looking forward to cleaning them up, testing them. We'll be keeping some of them, but we will be selling a lot of them. So if you're interested in any of these things, please let us know. It's a lot to go through, right? It's going to take a while. This is at my place where I took my Macintosh Plus and tested the HD20. So you can see underneath the HD20 is working and it is mounted on the screen. You can see that there. 20 meg hard drive, and there's a disk tools. With these old Macs, sometimes you could boot to the HD20 if you had a floppy with the driver in it, and then you could reboot, and then it would go, okay, I'm going to boot to the external drive now. Because the old Mac, only 128K of RAM, it was barely enough to do anything back in the day. So anyhow, that's a cool picture of the floppy EMU running, as well as the HD20, which is the non-SCSI 20 megabyte hard drive that you could boot your old compact Macs with. So I like that. And you can see here, that Plus has 4 megs of RAM. 4 megs of RAM is the maximum a Plus can have. So if you're trying to run System 7 on a Mac Plus, you want as much RAM as possible. Running 7.5.5 on a Mac Plus, probably not the best idea because System 6 runs a lot faster. This is just a picture of the chips on that Maximilian RAM expansion I showed you a few slides ago. You can see the latency here is 15, which means 150 nanoseconds or milliseconds. So the other chips I have, I think, are 10, which is 100. So a lot less latency, anything to do to make it a little bit faster. This you can see here is one of the, I think it's a 512 board, or it could be the Maximilian board, I can't remember. But you can see there it's only got 1 megabyte of RAM, so 1024K, and it's running System Finder 618 and System 608. This was super cool. We actually tested this recently, and it is working. This is a rare PDS card called a Turbo 601, and it was originally designed for the Macintosh 2 CI, but you could also run it in a 2 SI and a CX and some other machines with an adapter if you had it. I haven't seen these adapters around. I know some of my colleagues have one. There's reports of people trying to get this working on an SE30. Most things I've read say you can't do it. It's not going to work. It just, if you're lucky, you'll hear the PowerPC chime and then nothing happens. So it's trying to recognize it, but it doesn't really work. So the weird thing about this card is that it came with no heat sinks. So why would the heat sinks be off? I have no idea. But if you look at the picture here, in the corners, there's slots. And so those slots is where you put the heatsink in, then you twist it so it hangs on and keeps the chip cool. So this is a 601 clocked at 66 megahertz. It says 80 there, but it's actually down to 66, depending on the crystal. So this was Apple's first effort Motorola, IBM, and Apple all got together and built the PowerPC. And so the 601 was kind of, I think, the first version of that. So this card could take a Macintosh 2CI from 68030 25 megahertz up to a PowerPC 601 going 66. In some cases, I think you can, might be a 100 megahertz version of this. I did find some documentation online that will allow you to overclock this safely to 90 megahertz. But you do have to make sure it's got a heat sink, and you have to make sure that there's probably a fan on it as well. You do have to modify the crystal and a few other things, but you can do it. So Keith put some heat sinks on this, and we did test it in our 2CI. We got a 2CI system in our hall, which was really neat. It's one of my favorite machines, and it was used extensively in desktop publishing houses in the late 80s. So Turbo 601 card, fairly rare. I've never seen one in person before, so we have one of those. And once Keith put the heat sinks on, we actually tested it in the 2CI, and it did work. This is, the Mockingbird kit that I told you about in the last video. It comes with a test disc, and then there's instructions on how to solder everything on there. This is just a picture of my workbench with me starting the project and working on putting some of the sockets in. Last time I was over at Keith's house, I was testing the Laser 128EX. And so when we're testing all these machines, it's difficult to test everything. So you have to sit down and like, okay, let's test the keyboard, let's test the serial ports, let's make sure everything's actually working, and not just sell it to someone and, oh, sorry, that wasn't working, we didn't realize it, or whatever. So we're going to take some videos of like keyboard tests and RAM tests just to show people the integrity of the machines before we sell them to them. So that's what a Laser 128 looks like, and you can see in the background there's that 1 megabyte RAM expansion, which I think goes in the Laser 128, possibly. It'd be interesting to open that up and see if it's fully populated with memory chips or not. You can also see in behind there we're using an Apple IIc power supply. Because the Laser 128 is a clone, you can use the power from the IIc to power it. It's the same connector. And we also tested, we got a Monitor 3 in our collection that needed some tweaking, so I adjusted the geometry and the brightness, and it's working very well. The only thing dodgy here is it's a bit too far to the left. I'm not totally sure how to fix that, but that's just a game disc running the Lemonade stand. I just wanted to show that. This is that MPF3, that weird Apple clone that we saw the box for. So we did actually test this, and if you look in the corner here, you can see there's actually a Z80 chip. So this machine was designed with a Z80 chip built right into it. So that means this machine will natively run CP/M, which is really cool. So we've got a bunch of CP/M disks here. They won't boot on your Apple unless you have a Z80 card. I tried actually running something on my 2C earlier, and it said Z80 card not found. So it knows, hey, I need a Z80 before I can run this software. So this is a very unique Apple clone. I'd never heard of it before. There's the disk interface card with the 2 ports out the back. I don't know if you can see that, but so yeah, the MPF3, very unique Apple clone. Never heard of it, but we have one and it works. So that's kind of cool. There's another picture of it. It's got a fairly extensive keyboard, and we just hooked it up to one of our rotational monitors there. It says MPF3. So very neat piece of Apple history there. There's that ProDOS letter again. This was a picture of everything that was just the last bit that needed to go. So some monitors. There's that G3 server there. A lot of the towers kind of went last, it looks like. So this is some of the unique software that we found in our collection. So Virtual PC with Red Hat Linux. Very interesting. I didn't know this was a thing until I saw the box. So that could be of interest to some of you out there. Also, Universal Soft PC for all Macintosh computers. This software actually lets you emulate a DOS. I'm not sure about Windows, but you could actually run like DOS programs on your Mac using this software. And you can see here, this is very fun, this Apple Macintosh System 7 compatible. When System 7 first came out, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a bunch of software that would not run unless it was System 7 compatible. So if you were a developer and you were working on software, it would be a good idea for you to make sure it was System 7 compliant. As a matter of fact, when you installed System 7, System 7 would do a check, and it would take a look at your applications and go, yeah, this will work. Sorry, that's not going to work. This one will, that one won't. So you had to wait for developers to rewrite their code so that it was happy with System 7. So System 6 to System 7 was Apple's arguably one of their first major transitions. So it's neat to see a shrink-wrapped version of Soft PC with the System 7 thing on it saying, hey, I'm ready. There's just another picture of startup screen from one of the compacts. And this is our first sale. So Keith recapped this 2CI, and he recapped the power supply for the 2CI, and we actually just sold it recently. So if you have a machine that you need fixing, or if you would like to purchase some of the items that we have for sale, we're going to add a link in the feed here or in the comments where you can take a look at the list of everything that we have available. If there's something you find interesting that you would like to purchase, please let us know. We can sell it as is, or we can also do some repairs to it if you're willing to pay for the extra cost for that. Keith is very experienced at surface mount repairs. He has fixed many of my logic boards, which is fantastic, and he's also fixed many power supplies. So I love the work that Keith does. We're having a great time with this recent collection we just got. Like I said, there's 60 plus systems that we're currently dealing with, as well as a myriad of software peripherals. It's just crazy. All the stuff that we got, it's mental. But the 2CI here, we did sell that recently, so we're very happy about that. We're hoping to sell a lot of these systems, and it's going to take us a while to get through everything, but we just wanted to kind of publicly celebrate our first sale. So check the comments for the list of equipment that we will be selling, and if there's something you're interested in, you please let us know. So that's about the end of the broadcast. So I wanted to thank you for your time. This is my first live broadcast, so I hope it went well. We've been on the air for an hour and 18 minutes. Appreciate you guys following us. If you like the channel and like the content we're doing, please like, share, and subscribe. And it is time for me to go to bed because it's 1 in the morning. So take care, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the broadcast, and we'll talk to you later.